I'm Autumn Lockett.
And this is Mitch Randall.
And you're listening to Good Faith Weekly.
Welcome to Good Faith Weekly. And on this episode, Autumn and I are going to celebrate our 100th episode. We are so excited that you're joining us for this celebration. We're going to talk about our favorite guests, our high points over the last couple of years since we launched Good Faith Weekly. And then later on in the pod, we're going to sit down with our colleagues and talk about these last 2 years and the launch of Good Faith Media. We had a great time celebrating this 100th episode with our colleagues, so you're going to want to stay tuned for those interviews. Hey, Autumn, guess what time of year it is?
Halloween.
No.
Thanksgiving?
No.
It's too early for Christmas. People keep telling me.
It is a little too early for Christmas. No, it's the time of year when nonprofits ask for money.
You know, Mitch, I'm glad you brought that up.
Well, it is an exciting time of year because even here at Good Faith Media, we need to, from time to time, ask our listeners and readers to help support this great effort of keeping this message alive.
Yeah, the voices of inclusive people of faith are tragically underrepresented, leaving many feeling alone. And then we layered in this global pandemic, which pushed all of us further into isolation. But Good Faith Media provides a space for our voices to unite and impact the world for good.
And our daily news and opinion pieces provide thoughtful reflection from spiritual and thoughtful leaders around the world.
Our Nurturing Faith Journal is a print magazine that circulates 6 times a year to churches and households nationwide, delivering thoughtful analysis, inspiring features, and Jesus-focused Bible study curriculum.
And if you like this podcast, Good Faith Weekly, make certain to subscribe to more exciting and challenging podcasts brought to you by the Good Faith Media Podcast Network. Gather around your device as GFM continues advocating for inclusion for all, justice for all, and freedom for all. You can find more information about this at goodfaithmedia.org/donate. Autumn, 100.
Happy 100.
Happy 100. It is so hard to believe it's been 100 episodes, but here we are.
I know. Malcolm Gladwell, look at us now.
That's right, Gladwell. I mean, what have you done lately?
But I feel like we've gotten to that point where we've done this so much that it's almost second nature.
Yeah, it really is. You know, it's hard to believe we launched this thing in 2020, early on, first part of 2020. I think it was around March or so. Do you remember those, us talking about?
Is this COVID thing going to be a thing? Remember that? Remember when we had those episodes?
Yeah.
Turns out, yes.
Yeah.
Going to be a thing.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Yeah. We said, we'll be here, a couple of weeks, then we'll be back to normal. And here we are, still are.
Yeah, well, we kept planning on getting back in studio together.
Right.
And it just
never happened.
We've been able to do it a couple of times. But something I think that I've been really thankful for is during the pandemic, especially early days when we didn't really know how it was spread, how we could prevent it. There was no vaccine. People were dying. And recording this podcast gave me something each week that was sort of a ritual in a good way, that I was going to get to sit down for 30 minutes, block out the world, and talk with someone who was willing to be strong in their faith, but also hold space for questions. And I just looked so forward to that just moment of almost church that we spent together each week.
Yeah. I want to echo that because just being able to talk to some of the most thoughtful, interesting people known to us in our ecosystem has been more joyful than I could ever imagine. Mm-hmm. We were living through such dark days, especially uncertainty in those first few months, not knowing, as you said a moment ago, what this virus was going to do and how it was spread, but being able to connect not only with our guests, but with our audience, because we'd get feedback from people. Oh, we heard you interview so-and-so, heard you and Autumn talk about this topic or that. It was just, it's been life-giving, Autumn. I mean, in the midst of darkness and death, it's been life and light-giving to me. And it's been great, been a great experience.
It has. And it's also, the pandemic has set up and, just these 2 years of trying to decide, is this a safe person to have in my life? Are we working together for social justice? Or are you working against me? That kind of thing. There have been a lot of of like boundaries and walls and borders put up. And some of those are good. Like we have to put up some boundaries in relationships. Something that I've appreciated about Good Faith Weekly is that it really has dropped some of those more formal boundaries. You and I have interviewed some people who are, judges and professors and book authors and just movers and shakers. And they'll, comment on my kid's Halloween costume in the background of the closet, or, a child will run in and there's this gentle moment. We've had guests who've had their children pop on, and just the shared humanity that we've been able to experience together has been really special.
Yeah. So, over the last 100 episodes, what are some of your favorite moments that come to mind when you think about the show?
Oh goodness, I knew you were going to ask that. I it, it's been really interesting, I think, to talk to people um like Beth Allison Barr, like Amber Schmidtke, like Judge Wendell Griffin, like Jeremy Coleman. We've had some people who are really pushing professional and faith boundaries and asking those hard questions, and some of them are paying the price for it. And I think I have really, in 2016, I was talking about this in Sunday school a few weeks ago over a Tony Cartledge curriculum. I felt like in 2016 I was sort of an angry volcano. When everything went down, at the time I was working in higher ed, and I had DACA students coming into my office just in tears. Like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to finish my degree. My heart was broken in 2016, as many of ours were. And I was not a safe place for someone who had a dissenting voice. I was not. I was mad. And I think over the course of doing this work and watching people who are way more mature in their lives than I am, and how they're able to handle these so tricky situations, but still be a place where they can land, I just think that carving out this safe space has been really important and has been really good work.
Yeah. I can
What about
remember,
you?
I was thinking about that myself. I can remember the time where we had a local pastor down on the border who was at the border, in the process of doing border work when immigrants were migrating from Central America to the U.S. Mexico border. And we talked to him via phone to hear not only about his work, but the stories of the people he was ministering to. And it was just so inspirational. It was like, this is what this show can do. It can tell these stories, it can amplify these stories that may have gone untold otherwise, to show real time ministry unfolding and real time needs being exposed. You mentioned Amber Schmidtke. She has been a guest on the show numerous times now. She's an epidemiologist. I can finally say that word after 100 episodes. And just being able to educate, to be a trusted source of information, as she would tell us what the numbers meant, the variants that were coming out. And this was early on, talking about the potential of variants, as the virus was going to morph once it lost the ability to infect more hosts. And so, it was just to have a microphone, to have an outlet that says, yes, this too is part of my faith. This too is part of my faith, that my worldview is so Jesus centric that it touches every fabric of the world that I live in. So whether that's pandemic, whether that's calling out insurrectionists, whether that's denouncing white supremacy, whether that is trying to stand up for racial justice, these moments in this show have been extremely important, not only to me personally, but I think to the overall the overall conversation that's happening out there in the public square that needs to happen. We're part of that conversation, and we're trying to bend that arc of
Mhm.
history towards justice, as Dr. King inspired us to do. So it's been great. Now I'm going to say this, and I'm going to get really sappy here for a second, but another highlight for me has been flipping on the microphone and flipping on Zoom and seeing you at the other end.
Well, sometimes it was better than others, I'll just tell you.
Uh,
Haggard Mama 4 on the other end.
but seeing you in your cloffice, as you call it, and you've been through some stuff this last couple of years yourself, and you've
Yeah.
been open and honest about that. You've been very genuine and authentic, and I not only have our listeners appreciated it, but I appreciated it. When you're a pastor and minister, you kind of live in a fishbowl, and you get used to kind of sharing your life and people analyzing your life all the time. But you came out of public ed. You, I mean, you had a tinge of ministry many years ago.
Ministry adjacent, if
Yeah.
you will.
But over the last 2 years, you have invited the audience into your life, and people have been inspired by your story. They've been challenged by your words, and it's been a good thing. It's been a beautiful thing to see. So thank you for bringing it every week.
Well, and it's been exciting for me because, whenever you took the job with Ethics Daily, you were our pastor and our, great friend and all those fun things too. And so getting to have some
You were a little
pulpit
bit mad at
moments-
me back then.
I was very sad at you, as Ingrid would say. I was very sad. I was also postpartum, so there was a lot to do. There's a lot going on.
There was a lot going on.
We were very, and at the time, it's like, were y'all going to move? Are you going to leave? And so we were, just sad. But it's been nice to be able to have these pulpit moments with you because I think, you had been our pastor for 12 years, and going through life and being able to bounce ideas of what was going on in the world off of you was really life-giving for me. And I think it's been so neat to be able to share that and kind of pause the sermon and ask you a question, in this podcast
You wanted to do
format.
that for several years while I was your
I have
pastor.
been. Yeah, well, it's really sweet because, we have church members who have moved sort of all over the place. And we have one in Oregon. Shout out Tara. I know she's a listener. And, she wouldn't normally be able to still be in your congregation, but we all sort of still are. So that's really sweet.
Well, I appreciate that. That's very kind. Well, we do what we do because of our listeners and our colleagues, and here in a little bit, Autumn and I sat down with 6 of those colleagues to talk about the launch of Good Faith Media and what they have appreciated about this organization, as well as a look into the future. But another reason we do what we do is because we believe in an inclusive Christianity. We believe in an inclusive gospel. When even more precisely, we actually believe what Jesus said.
That is
And
crazy talk.
we,
That is just
we
crazy
actually, are trying to follow his example in the Gospels. And Autumn, please don't edit this out because when I say it, you're probably going to say, "Oh, he misspoke."
Okay.
But I mean it. For the first time in many, many years, I agree with Donald Trump Jr.
I'm going to have to let that one sit for a minute because I don't really know what you mean.
This week in the Atlantic, there is a story about Donald Trump Jr., and he has a lot to say that was honest about their worldview. And his words were, and I'm going to paraphrase, were basically this: Jesus has been holding the GOP back. We need to be more ruthless. That turn the other cheek nonsense is nonsense. He just basically said what we've been saying for years now, that to believe in this extreme right-wing movement that is not based in Christianity, and it's certainly not based in Jesus.
And we know it doesn't speak for all Republicans.
Right?
That's
No,
the thing.
exactly.
We know it doesn't.
Exactly.
So why are so many people acting like it does?
But to believe in this and to advocate for it and to implement it means you have to de-emphasize. And as Trump Jr. said, you basically have to obliterate Jesus from your worldview because he gets in the way.
Mm-hmm.
Think about that for a moment.
The Balaam's donkey of it all, Mitch.
Exactly. Oh, Balaam, the donkey just spoke to us. That's exactly right. But just think about that for a second. There is a movement that claims to be this moral high ground that has to get rid of Jesus in order to accomplish their goals.
There's another group of people that had to get rid of Jesus to accomplish their world goals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was.
It didn't go so well.
It did not.
No.
But that's why we do what we do, because we have this Jesus-centric, this Jesus worldview, ideology, and mindset that we call him Lord, we call him Savior. We believe everything that Jesus said, and we try to follow every example that Jesus set before us. We don't always get it right. We admit that. But he is the center of our universe, and he's certainly the center of our faith. And so to get up each and every week, to come to this mic, to pick up a computer keyboard and start writing, it's because that we believe in this person that we call Jesus. And as our colleague Johnny Pierce says, we need to have not a biblical worldview, but a Jesus worldview. And that's what we're trying to do at Good Faith Media.
Radical love, radical inclusion, radical justice, and love. I mean, love, that's it's just the recurring theme of all these sort of end of year wrap things that we've been doing, is that it's at the center of it, it's love and light, and excited to continue being a conduit of that.
Yeah. Well, Autumn, it's been a pleasure. 100 episodes. I cannot believe it. I cannot wait for the next 100 episodes. We're going to get right back into it next week.
Next year.
Next week is next year. We're going to be talking about the 1-year anniversary of the insurrection at the United States Capitol that took place on January 6th, 2021. And we'll have some guests on the show to talk about that as we begin a brand new year in 2022. But right now, you and I got to sit down with our colleagues, and it was a blast.
Mm-hmm.
So listeners, stay tuned, because you're in for a treat. We think we have the best team in the world, and in the next 20, 30 minutes or so, you're going to find out exactly why. So stay tuned.
I'm Starlette Thomas, and I invite you to join us for Good Faith Stories. It's a new podcast series from Good Faith Media. In each episode of Good Faith Stories, we'll bring you a collection of different stories tied to a theme. Unique and true stories as told by the people who live them. Each story is short, 6 or 7 minutes, with a little mood music. Listen to Good Faith Stories wherever you get your podcasts, and find us online at goodfaithmedia.org.
Welcome back to Good Faith Weekly, and we are continuing our celebration of our 100th episode here at Good Faith Weekly. It's hard to believe it's been 100 episodes as we launched Good Faith Weekly back in early 2020 when the pandemic first broke. But here we are, and we thought we would invite some of our colleagues to help celebrate this momentous occasion. And so with us this morning is Johnny Pierce, who is our executive editor for Good Faith Media, Cliff Vaughn, who's our media producer, and Starlette Thomas, who is the director of our Raceless Gospel Initiative. So welcome to the pod, you three.
Thank you. Thanks.
Well, 100 episodes. It's hard to believe that we have been ticking away.
Some of you may be doing some math and wondering how, since March of 2020, could we have crammed 100 episodes? Well, friends, I tell you that in the beginning, Mitch was so ambitious that we would often do 2 episodes a week. That's right, 2. Once we even did 3 episodes in 1 week because we had nothing else to do.
That's right. Man, I remember that. And of course, it was pretty easy for me because I was just lining up guests, hitting record.
His talent is always ready. I'm editing late into the night. Cliff knows. Cliff knows what this is like.
That's right.
He is a man of many talents. He is a man of many talents.
And words.
And words.
I don't.
Autumn's there late at night in her closet, editing away with coffee and cigarettes dangling out of her mouth, trying to get this thing done.
Twizzlers, Mitch. Come on.
Okay. Well, not only did we're celebrating 100 episodes here at Good Faith Weekly, but also we're celebrating Good Faith Media because the launch of Good Faith Weekly really coincided with Good Faith Media, and it was an exciting time over the last couple of years for us now, even though we launched it during the pandemic. So, Johnny, let's begin with you. I mean, tell us a little bit about your excitement when we finally decided to launch Good Faith Media.
One of the things I've noticed is that media is one of those plural terms that sometimes gets treated as if it's singular, but I think it's really important to emphasize the fact that Good Faith Media is a multimedia platform. And both of the organizations that form Good Faith Media brought experience and expertise to particular areas of media. Nurturing Faith was accustomed to doing publishing in print as well as digital with Nurturing Faith Journal and Bible studies, as well as book publishing. And Ethics Daily had real expertise that Cliff has led for a long time in producing video in various long and short formats, as well as being able to do podcasts. And then together, of course, we brought a digital or online presence with news and analysis and all of that has simply expanded in every way since we formed Good Faith Media. So I think the most obvious benefit to the formation of Good Faith Media is that we have brought together the mediums that we were already doing. We have added some new ones and we've expanded on the existing ones. So I think that we as Good Faith Media are really greater than the sums of our parts in what we're able to offer. And I would add one more thing, that is only possible because of the outstanding teamwork that we've experienced at Good Faith Media. And one of the things I say to friends of our previous organization, who I want to retain as close friends of Good Faith Media, is this was the best idea at the best possible time, and that things are going really well. And I want you to know that the teamwork really does work.
I'm so glad you said that because, anytime you bring two organizations together, there's bound to be maybe some friction. But in this case, everything went swimmingly, and it was though we had been working together for years. And that is just a testament to the humility, the creativity, the passion that all of our team members have. They were just outstanding, and it's been an outstanding couple of years. So thanks for saying that, Johnny. Now, Cliff, you are a media producer, and when the pandemic broke, you were primarily working on video. And so we decided to take your camera away and to say, here is a soundboard, go create podcast. So how's that been? I mean, kind of making a shift. I mean, we're still doing video, just doing it more creatively, but the shift from focusing primarily on video to creating podcast, how was that for you?
I've really loved the podcasts, and that's not something that I would have guessed about myself because I had grown up a fan of motion pictures and video and documentary. And so that was really my interest. And it still is a great interest of mine. But I will have to say that for years, people have said it's about the story. It's about the story. It's about the story. And that's true. When your camera is taken away and you're left with only audio, I've come to, I hope, a greater appreciation for the power of just audio only, and how that too is so capable of telling a multifaceted story. And sometimes these are short stories that people can tell in the context of an interview. And sometimes they're long form stories, but I have really taken to the platform, the medium, the approach, the possibilities. I still have a lot to learn, but I have, it's been one of those weird things in which the pandemic has opened up an opportunity that I've tried to be open to. And so I hope I have embraced it. I really enjoyed it.
So, I mean, we have produced over this last couple of years, not only Good Faith Weekly, but a plethora of other podcasts, some that are our own productions, others that we worked with partner organizations. So, what are some of the highlights over the last couple of years producing podcasts for you?
Well, certainly working on Brother Molly, which I've been working on for well over a year prior to when it came out, about the time the pandemic launched. I love the long form stuff, whether it's video or whether it's podcast. This year we're going to be, or this coming year in 2022, we're going to be working on another long form narrative podcast on the history of Second Baptist Church in Little Rock. Starlette and I are going to be working on that, and I've been doing background research on it for months. We're going to start production hopefully in January. We've got some trips planned. So I'm excited about that. But I love the long form stuff because you engage issues, people, concepts, trends, and how you feel about them today. You might feel about them differently 6 months from now, or you will have likely new information. And this is not to say that we can't do things quickly. Obviously we do them in 24-hour cycles or faster, and that's important. But I still think there's also an opportunity and a place and some real insight that comes from spending a year or two with something and tracing that narrative and that arc. And that's not to say, the last thing I'll say about it is, that's not to say, okay, you spend a year on something or 2 years on something, and therefore you quote unquote get it right. No, if you spent 2 more years with it, it would be shaded a little bit differently.
Sure.
But the long form process does yield something that's different and important, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Well said. Well, when we launched Good Faith Media back in 2020, Starlette Thomas was not on staff. In fact, she was employed by another organization, but she worked with us writing incredible columns for our news and opinion section, and she was just an incredible contributor. Well, in the back of our mind, though, we just thought, if an opportunity ever arose to bring Starlette aboard, let's jump on that. Well, that opportunity arose, and within about 2 hours of that news breaking, I got 2 phone calls. One was from Cliff. The other was from a board member that we love, has been a guest on the pod, the Dr. Kevin Hefner, and both of them said, hire Starlette, hire her now, do whatever you need to get her. So we extended.
I talked to Kevin 2 weeks ago, and he was still... No, Starlette, we're good, right? She's good. She's staying. He's such your fan. So Kevin, Dr. Kevin Hefner, Starlette is here. You can hear it straight from her. She's here and she's happy.
That's right. Well, we extended an invitation to Reverend Thomas, and she accepted, and we have launched, after her years of experience developing this concept, the Raceless Gospel Initiative here at Good Faith Media. And we are just thrilled that she came on board and has been doing incredible work trying to dismantle the concept of race. And so, Starlette, thanks for joining the team. So tell us a little bit about those, that decision. How did you decide, I want to be a part of this organization?
It's definitely because I'd already had previous experience with you all. Like I'd seen Mitch in the Bahamas doing that hard work for the Lord.
Yeah, Cliff and I were suffering for Jesus down in the Bahamas.
Under the Bahamian sun, and I saw the glimmer of Christ in your eye. So I'd already,
It was suntan oil, Starlette. It was suntan oil. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'd already had some experience with Mitch and with Cliff. In ministry work, but I'd also been writing, as you had mentioned, with Zach, and we just had a great working relationship. The ability to, as a creative, as all of us are, the ability to work across platforms is incredibly alluring. It's what Johnny said, like the fact that I can play with words in so many ways, and if you can't think of a way, Mitch will think of a way for you. He will have an idea. I was wondering if we could. And then before you know it, you have a podcast, and then I was thinking, and I'll be right back, and I want you to interview these. He just makes it happen in a way that I'm just invited to stretch, to grow, to play around with words, to push beyond the limits of what I have imagined. It would be difficult. It would be ludicrous not to say yes. I have stretched as a person, and I have to really harp on the option to, the invitation to imagine.
Well, the
Moving.
podcast is absolutely outstanding. You and Cliff have done remarkable work in developing the Raceless Gospel Pod. If you're not a subscriber, you need to be. Go hit subscribe right now. But
Mhm.
Starlet, since you joined the team, we have been able to travel to some really incredible places and have some really moving experiences. And I want to focus in on our trip to Tulsa to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the Tulsa Race Massacre. That was an extremely powerful trip. Tell us a little bit about your reaction to that trip. Now that we're several months away from it.
Thought about it the other day. Just did. I'm always studying race and reading about race. And I was reading a history book on race and what race does to us, what white supremacist structures do to us. And I immediately went back to that. I remember us coming upon having the conversation. I said the anniversary is approaching. And it was an immediate yes, we will go. And so having the opportunity to go and stand in the space and be in the place at that exact time is a deep work for me. It's a soul work for me. I am working out my salvation from race. So to be afforded those opportunities to go into spaces that have been racialized and where human beings have been brutalized in that way, that is healing, transformative work that I hope we're communicating to our audience. And it's still very moving to me. I'm still very moved by it. And if you all have not seen the coverage of that, please visit that as well. Go to those sacred spaces. We have an initiative where we do that. We go to these sacred spaces where acts of violence have been committed, and we pray over those spaces. We name those interactions. We say those persons' names, at least in my experience, when I'm taking you guys to what I consider sacred spaces. It is where blood has been shed and where that blood is crying from the ground to me. I feel like it's calling me to come and say their name and then just to eulogize them, however long or even briefly. So for me, going to Tulsa, highlight of my life.
Well, thanks. Well, it was an incredible trip. Well, I just want to thank all three of you for joining us on the pod to celebrate the 100th episode of Good Faith Weekly. But before we let you go, Autumn always asks our guests a question that is associated with our tagline here at Good Faith Media. And here's what I want you to do. Let's frame it a little bit this time. I want you to think about the future. I mean, we've got 2 years under our belt here, almost 2 years under our belt here at Good Faith Media. But let's dream a little bit as she asks the final question. So, Autumn, why don't you take it away and ask our question?
Sure. So, our tagline, as all of you know and live out every single day, our tagline at Good Faith Media is "There's more to tell." So, Johnny, I'll start with you, and then Cliff, and then Starlet. You can bring in the benediction. What is your more to tell?
Intriguing, insightful, inspiring stories are everywhere. Often they are tucked away, but they are everywhere. And I've had this dream on occasions over the past 22 years as editor of this journal. Oh no, there's nothing else to write about. And that is a ridiculous feeling because it's not based on reality. The reality is these stories are everywhere. Let's go find them.
Love that.
I was reading a book on grief the other day, and there was a quote from Willa Cather, and it said, "Where there is great love, there are always miracles." And so the other day we were talking, and I was talking about love, which is something I think about a lot, and what that looks like manifested. And so trying to think about love, not in that kind of kumbaya, wishy-washy way, although that's helpful and nice sometimes, but also love as a powerful force that helps us engage constructively the problems that we have. And so if it's true that where there is great love, there are always miracles, then that's a hopeful word for me that I'm carrying into 2022.
Love that. And Reverend Thomas, bring us home.
No pressure. No, my thought is this, that there's a kingdom coming, and that while we are hyper divided, there's hyper politicization. We're being pulled to each extreme, that it will all come together. That if we just grab hold of one hand, of one person, just one day, of 1 week, for one moment, that it will all come together, that we will all come together. And it's that force that Cliff is talking about. It's love. You'll just take the leap of faith and believe in love. Just one more time. And if you knew my story, if you knew my story, you would do it.
Mm.
Because it takes great hope. It takes great faith to love in the midst of hate, to love in the midst of division, to love when everything is pushing and pulling against the opportunity to come together. And so my word is that it will all come together, not because of one political party or the other, but in the name of, by the force of, and by the grace of love.
Mm. Amen, amen, amen. Well, on behalf of the organization, and I think I can speak for Autumn, we just count it an honor each and every day to wake up and work alongside such talented individuals like yourself. Thank you for making Good Faith Weekly a great podcast, and thank you for making Good Faith Media such an inspiring organization to work for. It's because of you we are able to get up and do what we do. So thank you very much for all that you bring to the table.
Thank you.
Thank you, and Happy New Year.
Absolutely. Well, to our audience, stay tuned because Autumn and I are going to bring 3 more of our colleagues into the pod and talk a little bit about their time with Good Faith Media and what they are dreaming about in the future. So stay tuned. Welcome back to Good Faith Weekly, and we are joined by 3 more of our colleagues here at Good Faith Media, Bruce Gorley, Tony Cartledge, and Elisa Adalpe. We are so excited to have you on the pod as we continue to celebrate our 100th episode. Welcome to Good Faith Weekly. We had 3 more of our colleagues earlier on the show, and they were delightful. And it's just fun to be around some really good people and to work alongside good people like yourselves. And so we're thankful for each and every one of you. So Tony, let's start with you. Tony's on the road actually today, so you may hear a siren or 2 in the background. But Tony, let's just start with you. And we've started Good Faith Media. It was a merger, as we've already talked about, between Nurturing Faith and Ethics Daily. But what has been meaningful for you as Good Faith Media has launched and we are where we are now?
Well, I suppose the biggest thing is the idea of being a part of something larger, something with a wider reach that can communicate with more people, have more options for getting the word out. For me, it's been a bit of a shift instead of just writing a blog whenever I felt like it, morphed into mainly writing a column a week in addition to the other things that I write for American Faith. And beyond that, the biggest change is a lot more staff meetings.
True that. Well, Tony, your columns are always well received, with your Bible studies that are in the journal. Just hard to believe you've written so many lessons over the course of these years. But one of the things that was really surprising to us as we started to take over the administration of the journal was, I don't know if you know this, but you got a huge fan club out there. I mean,
you're kind of a big deal.
You're kind of a big deal, Tony. I mean, people call and, they say, hey, that Tony Cartledge, he is amazing. And I mean, just makes me think each and every week. It's like, yeah, we know he's great and all. But you do a great job, and we're just so thankful for everything that you do. Now, on the other side of things, we get phone calls all the time. Say, that Bruce Gorley, man, he really irked me this year or this month because he was so provocative. No, I'm kidding, Bruce. People love you as well. So Bruce oversees our book publishing division as well as our experience coordinator, bringing people to Montana, to Yellowstone National Park, Glacier National Park, and other national parks across. It just does a great job doing that. Well, Bruce, you've been with us now for quite some time. So tell us a little bit about your experience with Good Faith Media. What is some of the highlights for you working for this organization?
Well, it's great to be a part of an expansive organization that is increasingly inclusive, that has a broad reach, even beyond our own worlds sometimes. And it's really wonderful to see that. During the pandemic era, I have to say that I have really enjoyed the relatively few opportunities we've had together in small groups with our experiences, especially out here in the West. And it was, I think, for all of us who participated, especially meaningful during these past 2 years with Good Faith Media. To be able to meet in person, to gather in person, to have conversations out in nature. Really enjoyed Autumn and Missy being introduced to Good Faith experiences and
It
the
was amazing.
enthusiasm.
It was amazing. That trip is the high. People are like, "What's the highlight of your year?" I'm like, glacier for sure. Like specifically hiking up to the glacier, even though I was terrified. I don't think I've ever been that sweaty in my whole life, and not just from the exertion, from the nerves. But yeah, you're just an artful guide and like push people in all the right ways, and just the way that you bring that little community together when we're on that experience is so meaningful.
So glad you were able to join us. Look forward to you joining us again next year for some experiences.
Aloha.
That's right, Hawaii. And Mitch, it was good to see you, to have you out here in Montana as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
On one of our weeks.
Well, if you have not signed up for one of our experiences, you need to do so. Go to goodfaithmedia.org. Check out what's going to happen in 2022. Bruce, as Autumn said, is an incredible guide and just a master at doing it. And so it was a great time being up with you and others at Yellowstone. And Missy just kept talking about how much fun she had with you in Glacier. So appreciate you leading that part of our organization. But there's also a moment in the last couple of years, Bruce, I want to talk about. It's I don't want to get too deep into the woods or be too much of a downer, but the January 6th insurrection last year prompted us to act and to say something.
This year.
Was this year.
It was this year.
It feels like last year.
It does.
It feels like it was 10,000 years ago.
When James Madison was president.
People posted a picture of Bernie at the inauguration with his little mittens on, and they're like, "This wasn't even a year ago. It feels like it was 10 years ago." Time is just it's a weird circle right now.
Jeremy bear me.
Absolutely. Well, that was a pivotal moment, not only in American history, but for us as an organization, because us, as well as other organizations that we partner with, felt the need to respond. And the way we chose to do so is to ask you, a historian, to talk about the history of white Christian nationalism. And so we put on a couple of webinars with some partnering organizations, and you did a brilliant job. And that's inspired you to even do more work in this area. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, I recently finished a lifelong learning course at Montana State University on Christian nationalism, which was it was eye-opening to many people here in Bozeman. And I'm working on a book as well on this subject. It is a pivotal moment. We're still at a tipping point, I think, in terms of democracy as we know it, perhaps democracy at all in America. And our work, I think, in seeking to, Mitch, you talk about Christian nationalism as well. You did a talk with Baptist History and Heritage Society, and I think in other venues perhaps you have as well. It's important, I think, that we address this. One of the things of the many things that worry me during this era, there seems to be it's interesting that there's not as much discourse about this as one would think there would be after an insurrection took place. Mm-hmm. This was treason, basically, against our democracy, against our Constitution. And some want to forget it, to marginalize it, to reinterpret it, whatever, to dismiss it. That must not be the case. And I think although Christian nationalism, I always stress, is not necessarily Christian.
Right. That's exactly right.
We as Christians certainly I think we have an obligation to address this, to seek to respond to it.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate all the work that you've done over the last year since January 6th, also work that you've done previously, and looking forward to what's going to come next as we continue to stand up and speak out against this atrocity, not only towards democracy, but the harm it's causing towards the gospel itself. And so thank you for everything that you're doing. Well, when we started Good Faith Media, we did not have the pleasure of working with Elisa Adalpe, but there was a
But
moment.
we got there as quickly
as we could. That's exactly right. I was telling Star in the last segment the same thing. I said, there have been people that I have come into contact with over the 20-something years I've been doing ministry that I think in the back of my head, one of these days, if I'm lucky, I'll get to work with that person. And one of those persons is you, Elisa. And I am so thrilled that you joined us to be a contributing collaborator here at Good Faith Media. And so what's it meant to you coming in, halfway through the launch of this thing and you come from like many of us do, a local church background, and now you're doing this kind of work. So tell us a little bit about your experience so far.
Yeah. So Mitch, you might remember the march that the world turned upside down, if you will. You were at First Baptist in DC, and everyone was like, hey, I don't know if I'm going to get a flight home.
Mm-hmm.
Should we even be in this room together?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It broke out. You and I were, this is going to sound really strange, breathing the same air when the pandemic broke.
I remember just remembering conversations of not even like the conversations itself, but like people being close to each other going, hey, so what's your church doing on Sunday? Right. And like the fact that we were that close going, hey, what is your church doing on Sunday?
Exactly.
It's like, oh my God, we really stood that close to each other back then. I remember the launch of Good Faith Media, and, it was one of those moments, like the world is everything is just so uncertain, right? And then you have a group of people who say, okay, we don't know what 2 weeks or what's going to happen in 2 weeks, what's going to happen in 2 months, and yet to stay faithful to this collaboration and to this partnership, and to continue forward. I think it was really cool. One, from the outside watch, like reading and seeing the projects that y'all were taking on. It felt very different. And I think in a time of, I always say this now, during this pandemic, everyone has had more time to be at home, more time to sit with their thoughts, and to pay really close attention to the things that have just been the status quo for so long. When you notice people doing things differently or more thoughtfully, you pay attention. Yeah. And that was Good Faith Media for me. And so when I had the opportunity to work with y'all, that wasn't, it was a very scary step, but it was also one that I knew that this was an organization that I would be really proud to work alongside, because of the thoughtful writing, the way that y'all are intentional about bringing diverse voices, and not in a way that says, oh, we're diverse for diversity's sake, but to honestly ask ourselves, what is it that has been the status quo that we need to disrupt, and for Good Faith Media to do that and do it well and honestly and intentionally, is a breath of fresh air for me. So that is what Good Faith Media has meant to me, and to get to be a part of it. Having the jacket is like having the members only jacket that I'm
You lettered, Elisa. You lettered here at Good Faith Media.
That's right.
Well, we are certainly glad you joined us and to be a part of this incredible team that we have here at Good Faith Media. Now, recently, you and your fiancé, and I say that with a big grin on my face, congratulations.
We all have our sunglasses on, so we're not blinded by your beauty.
Yes, I hope my ring light doesn't just blind all with this.
You were featured in the Washington Post in a story that just talked about how difficult this pandemic has been on all clergy, and you were very open and honest about your experience. And I appreciate you and Nick letting that reporter in your life and just kind of talk a little bit about your experience. But how has it been difficult for our clergy? And you voiced it very well in the Post, but for our audience, just kind of, tell us a little bit about your thoughts. I mean, this has been a tough 2 years.
Yeah. So first of all, now I get why my mom's always said to keep your house just a little bit cleaner than you want it to be, because then before you know it, there's a photographer and a Washington Post journalist coming in and you're yelling, Nick, throw everything in the closet. And so lesson learned now. Now I know. Yeah. So it was, that is not, I think it's not an easy space to be in as as a journalist who goes in and like, hey, this very vulnerable thing, let's talk about it, and to share that space with somebody who is still processing. And I mean, for all three of the pastors and ministers who she interviewed, I mean, each of us had our own story that we're still, still processing and still unpacking. And and I think what you can convey in writing, right? Because it's not always, you can't always get
Sure. Sure.
the full effect. But for me, I think it was helpful for me to just, remind myself that did happen, and I did make that brave step, which was not easy, and it was very scary and sad. But knowing that other people could read that and know they weren't alone, or knowing that I think for so many in traditional church ministry, there has been this idea that we have to give of ourselves and give and give and give, and being tired is just part of the job, and never separating your pastoral identity from your personal identity, that you're not allowed. And I think at a certain point during the pandemic, I think so many had to ask themselves, well, wait a minute, is this normal? Is that normal? Is this normal? On top of a pandemic and the different views about how we should come at it. And then what happened, in summer of 2020 with the demonstrations and the protests, and then January 6th, and then the election, in January 6th, and all of these things. And I think for me, the bigger question was, if I cannot be as thoughtful and help not persuade, but guide my people through any of these things in the before times, and it's not really conveying it now in a way that I hoped it would. You have to ask hard questions of what, how is my gift being used, or how am I using my calling now? And yeah, you have to ask hard questions. And so to be able to help others know that they weren't alone in asking those questions, and making those really scary and hard decisions, that I know if for anybody else who would have been on there, that would have been helpful for me.
Sure. Well, I really appreciate what you and Nick had to say in the post. I think it was a great help for many, many people across the country, and our clergy are still struggling. There are people out there who are over their head, and like you said, it's hard to believe. Just in this last 2 years, everything that happened in the last 2 years happened within a pandemic, and so so thank you for being bold and brave and honest and genuine. We really appreciate it. Well, you three are incredible colleagues. Autumn and I are so fortunate to wake up each and every morning knowing that you are walking alongside us, and we appreciate you immensely as we continue celebrating this 100th episode of Good Faith Weekly. But before we let you go, Autumn asked one last question to all of our guests. She's been doing it for 100 episodes, so why stop now? And it has to do with our motto. So Autumn, take it away.
Yes, as you all know and actively participate with us in the process of practicing this at Good Faith Media, our motto is "There's more to tell." So as we look ahead to 2022, no whammies, no whammies. What is your more to tell? We'll go Tony, Bruce, and then Elisa. You'll be our benediction.
Tony, for me, there's more to tell because there's always more to learn. And as long as there's more to learn, there's more to tell.
Wow, that was so professorial. That was outstanding. I love that, Tony. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. So, Bruce, you're up.
There's more to tell. I think there's more that we hope to experience in the years ahead. Good, positive. And I look forward to more. And I've said this previously, Autumn. I just said it on a moment last time. But I look forward to more good faith with good people and great experiences that we have at GFM, and to have some new folks with us next year.
I love that. Thanks, Bruce. And Reverend Adolpe, bring home the benediction.
Oh God. So yeah, I had this the history professor in undergrad who helped me kind of like reimagine narratives that were told, and the way he framed it was asking who gets to say the story, right? Who gets to hold control over the narrative, and more who has the power. And so for me, it is always about who has the power, which we know we all have power in our own ways, but how do we relinquish some when others need to shine theirs, right? And if we truly believe that God is a God of abundance, then we have to believe that in how we practice sharing our power. And so for me, the story, there's more to tell, is that there are always more people who we share a power with. And for more stories to be told, we have to be willing to relinquish some of our own power and some of our own narrative for those that have often gone untold.
I love that. And that is a great way to bring this home. I love sharing power with all of you, and to receive the power that you give me is just so inspirational. So thank you so much for helping us celebrate this 100th episode. And more so, thank you for contributing to this great work of the gospel that we're doing here while we're on this rock of ours. So thank you for all that you do.
Thanks, Mitch.
You bet. Well, Autumn, that's a wrap on 100 episodes. What do you think?
That's right.
That's pretty good. Yeah, we're excited about it. Well, to our listeners, we could not have done 100 episodes without you tuning in. And so we thank you so much for the last 100 episodes. We're looking forward to the next 100 episodes that we'll be celebrating down the road. Until next week, as always, keep living good faith.